Imagine a world where in one moment, you're surrounded by laughter, warmth, and the familiar voices of loved ones. The next moment, that joy is shattered by cries for help, hands reaching out in desperation, and your own heart racing as your life flashes before your eyes. It's a reminder of how, in an instant, life can spiral into the unimaginable. This isn't the plot of a movie, but the chilling reality of one family's nightmare. On December 24th, 2008, the quiet town of Covina, California, was rocked by an unspeakable tragedy. What was meant to be a joyous Christmas Eve celebration turned into one of the most horrifying cases of family violence in recent history. In a calculated attack, 9 lives were taken, and a close-knit community was left traumatized. Known as the Covina Family Massacre, this brutal act left an indelible mark on all who heard the story. Our hearts go out to the Ortega family, whose joyful evening was transformed into a nightmare, and to all who knew and loved them. As we delve into the details of this heartbreaking story, we honor their memories, recognizing the loss and pain endured by the survivors and the community still affected by this tragedy. It was a scene straight from a holiday card on Christmas Eve at the Ortega family's home in Covina, California. The house, festively adorned with twinkling lights and warm decorations, radiated the magic of Christmas. Outside, a light chill hung in the air, but within these walls, the Ortega family was wrapped in the warmth of togetherness and joy, celebrating the season they treasured most. Every Christmas, they gathered in like this: children, parents, grandparents, siblings, and cousins, coming together to create memories they would talk about for years. In the dining room, the laughter was loudest, where the family was engaged in a spirited game of Texas Hold'em. It was a yearly tradition they all looked forward to, a chance for gentle competition, playful teasing, and lighthearted banter. Around the table, Joe Ortega, the family's patriarch, sat with his beloved wife of 53 years, Leticia. Their smiles lit up the room as they watched their children and grandchildren joke and compete, faces illuminated in the glow of holiday lights. Joe's hearty laughter boomed each time someone won a hand, and Alicia's warm gaze moved lovingly from one family member to another. She cherished these moments, a symbol of all they had built together over a lifetime. Across the room, their son Charles and his wife were talking about their own holiday memories, sharing stories with the family. Charles, with a wide grin, was recounting childhood Christmases when Joe would hide the presents and the children would race through the house, searching every nook and cranny. Everyone laughed, caught up in the nostalgia, remembering the playful warmth that had always defined their family. It was easy to get lost in this joy, each story a reminder of the bonds that held them all together. In the backyard, a group of young cousins were engrossed in video games, their excitement filling the air as they huddled close, eager to beat each other's high scores. They darted back and forth across the patio, laughing, shouting, and occasionally daring each other to jump into the chilly pool, a running joke among the kids that no one ever took seriously. For these young ones, this gathering was the highlight of their year. They loved being surrounded by family, a feeling of safety and happiness that seemed endless. Meanwhile, upstairs in his own quiet space, 17-year-old Michael Ortega was seated at his computer, lost in a world of his own. He was working on a project, his focus occasionally interrupted by the sounds of laughter and conversation that floated up from downstairs. Michael enjoyed these gatherings too, though he preferred to keep to himself. But the warmth of his family's presence was something he valued deeply, knowing that if he wanted, he could go downstairs and be met with open arms and smiles. Back downstairs, the family's evening continued, filled with little moments of love and connection that made the holiday feel so special. Some family members were still at the table, sipping on eggnog and talking about plans for the coming year. Others moved in and out of the kitchen, cleaning up dishes and sneaking a taste of the last remaining holiday treats. In the living room, a small group had gathered to watch a Christmas movie, the familiar sound of classic carols playing in the background. Each person was absorbed in their own favorite part of the celebration, from the oldest to the youngest, finding joy in the simplicity of being together. And just outside, the Ortega home stood proudly as it had every Christmas, a beacon of family and festivity in the quiet neighborhood of Covina. The windows glowed with a soft, welcoming light, inviting anyone who passed by to take in the sight of a family bound by love. This night felt timeless, a moment frozen in the kind of peace that only the holidays could bring. It was a time to forget the troubles of the world and simply enjoy the closeness of family, each person fully embraced by the joy that had surrounded them. In this picture-perfect scene, no one could have imagined that their lives would soon be changed forever. In these final untroubled moments, the Ortega family was unaware of the darkness about to descend. They laughed, they played, they reminisced, never knowing that this Christmas Eve, so full of warmth and laughter, would be their last as a complete family. The evening was calm and joyful, with the Ortega family fully immersed in their Christmas celebration. Laughter and conversation filled every corner of the house as children played and adults shared stories. Then a knock on the front door shattered the serenity of the night. An 8-year-old girl, caught up in the excitement of the holiday, ran to the door, squealing in delight as she called out, "Santa Claus! Santa Claus!" She was expecting a magical moment, the arrival of Santa to bring Christmas cheer to their gathering. Instead, the man at the door, dressed as Santa, pulled out a handgun and aimed directly at her. The gunshot echoed throughout the house, piercing the joyful atmosphere and replacing it with terror. The little girl fell to the ground, and as her family realized what was happening, horror swept over them. Two of her uncles, acting instinctively, rushed toward her, desperate to protect her from further harm. But before they could shield her, the gunman aimed his weapon at them, shooting them both as they tried to reach their young niece. They fell beside her, helpless to stop the nightmare that was only beginning. Panic erupted as family members scattered, frantically trying to escape or hide from the intruder. Screams filled the house, drowning out the sounds of Christmas music that continued to play in the background, a haunting reminder of the joy that had been there only moments before. Some family members huddled together, crouching under tables or pressing themselves against walls, hoping to escape the gunman's line of sight. Others tried to shield their loved ones, standing between them and the attacker in a desperate attempt to save lives. The gunman, however, was relentless. He moved through the house with brutal efficiency, shooting anyone he saw. There was no mercy in his actions. He was there to inflict maximum pain and suffering, and he did so with a cold, calculated precision. Family members who had been enjoying their Christmas celebration just moments earlier were now struggling to survive, terrified as they witnessed the unimaginable horror unfolding around them. The attack was merciless and swift, leaving the Ortega family with no time to process what was happening. The man who had once been a familiar face to some in the family had now become a monstrous figure, disguised as Santa, yet bringing nothing but death and destruction. The peace of Christmas Eve had been ripped away, replaced by a brutal scene of violence and despair, as the gunman continued his horrific rampage without hesitation or remorse. As the horror of the night unfolded, the gunman pulled out one final devastating weapon, a homemade flamethrower. It was a weapon designed with pure malice, constructed to maximize destruction and leave no trace of the lives he intended to obliterate. The flames erupted as he activated it, and in a matter of seconds, the Ortega family's beloved home was transformed into a raging inferno. Walls that had once held countless cherished memories now became fuel for the flames as the fire spread rapidly, consuming everything in its path. The blaze moved with terrifying speed, swallowing rooms, furniture, and decorations in seconds. The scent of burning wood and fabric mingled with the acrid smell of gasoline, creating a dense, suffocating smoke that filled the air. The family members who had tried to hide now found themselves trapped, with no way to escape the choking heat and the blinding darkness. For those caught inside, there was little time to react. The fire closed in, making every breath a struggle and every second an eternity. Outside, neighbors watched in shock and horror, drawn out of their homes by the sounds of screams and the sight of flames shooting high into the night sky. The fire grew so large that it was visible from blocks away, casting an eerie orange glow over the quiet streets of Covina. It was as if the entire house had been swallowed up by an infernal beast, with flames reaching heights of 40 to 50 feet, roaring with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. The blaze was so powerful that it defied immediate attempts to control it. Emergency calls flooded in, and within minutes the first wave of firefighters arrived. But even with all their equipment and expertise, they were confronted by a fire of unprecedented ferocity. The heat was overwhelming, pushing them back as they tried to get close enough to aim their hoses. They attacked the flames from multiple angles, but the fire fought back, fueled by the accelerants and the intensity of the attack. In total, 80 firefighters were called in, working tirelessly in shifts to subdue the inferno. And yet it took them over an hour and a half to bring it under control. As the fire finally began to die down, the true extent of the devastation became clear. The once vibrant home was now reduced to charred remnants, barely recognizable. The Ortega family's holiday decorations, the warm and welcoming rooms filled with memories, had all been obliterated, leaving behind only ashes and ruin. But the physical destruction was just the beginning. The fire had claimed lives, and identifying those who had perished became an even more difficult and heart-wrenching task due to the sheer intensity of the blaze. In the days that followed, investigators worked methodically, sifting through the rubble in search of clues. The flames had ravaged the bodies to the point where visual identification was impossible. Family members who had survived were spared the traumatic task of identifying their loved ones through sight alone. Instead, dental records became the main method for identification, with investigators meticulously matching dental x-rays to confirm each identity. In some cases, medical records were used, relying on unique scars, bone structures, or other physical markers that had somehow survived the intense heat. This painstaking process took time and left the surviving family and the community in a state of prolonged grief as they waited for confirmation of who had been lost. The damage inflicted by the gunman went beyond physical destruction. It had left emotional scars that would linger for years. The Ortegas' home, once a place of warmth and joy, had become a tragic symbol of unimaginable loss. Its smoldering remains a haunting reminder of a family torn apart in the cruelest way. And for the loved ones left behind, the knowledge of their family's final moments, trapped and overwhelmed by the flames, was a burden that would weigh on them forever. The Ortega family's Christmas Eve was transformed from a joyous gathering into a scene of unimaginable loss. The assault claimed the lives of 9 beloved family members, each one leaving a void that could never be filled. Among the victims were Joe Ortega, affectionately known as Papa Joe, a kind and wise patriarch whose warmth had always been the center of every family gathering. Beside him was his wife, Alicia, his partner of over 50 years, whose gentle spirit and love bound the family together. Their lives and the lives of 4 of their children, 2 daughters-in-law, and a grandchild were all cruelly taken, leaving a once tight-knit family shattered. Yet amidst the horror, a story of survival emerged, a testament to the strength and courage of those who endured the tragedy. Leticia Yusefsky, one of Joe and Alicia's daughters, managed to survive that horrific night. When the gunfire erupted, Leticia's instincts took over. She pulled her young daughter close and, along with other family members, dove beneath the dining room table, hoping to find some semblance of shelter. Heart-pounding, she held her daughter tightly, trying to stay calm, though chaos erupted around them. Desperately, Leticia dialed 911, her voice trembling as she described the nightmare unfolding in her home. Through her fear, she pleaded for help, her voice capturing the raw terror and urgency of the situation. Despite the imminent danger, Leticia's protective instincts took precedence. She noticed that her daughter had been injured, shot in the face, yet somehow alive and in need of immediate medical attention. She whispered words of comfort and strength, fighting her own panic as she assured her child that help would come. In the brief moments of reprieve from gunfire, Leticia helped guide her injured daughter and several other family members to safety, navigating them out of the house as the flames began to spread. Amidst the darkness and smoke, Leticia's actions saved lives. Despite the harrowing injuries sustained by her young daughter, who had been shot in the zip code, the girl managed to survive, later credited by medical experts with saving herself by instinctively turning her head at the last second, reducing the bullet's impact. This small miracle, however, did not diminish the trauma. Both mother and daughter would forever carry the physical and emotional scars of that night, but Leticia's courage in the face of horror gave her family a fighting chance. After the attack, Leticia found herself grappling not only with the loss of her parents and siblings, but also with the responsibility of being a source of strength for her surviving family members. In the wake of the tragedy, she would become a pillar for the children and relatives who had lost so much, holding them together through shared grief and a commitment to honor the memories of those they had lost. In the years that followed, Leticia would speak openly about the power of resilience and the importance of choosing love and gratitude over hate, carrying forward a legacy of hope in the face of tragedy. As investigators combed through the remains of the Ortega home and pieced together the harrowing events of that night, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The gunman, who had entered the home dressed as Santa Claus and committed unimaginable violence, was identified as Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, the ex-husband of Sylvia Ortega Pardo, one of Joe and Alicia's daughters. Recently divorced from Sylvia, Pardo had been harboring deep resentment and anger over the end of their marriage. This bitterness had festered, growing into an unthinkable rage that he unleashed on the family in the most brutal manner imaginable. As police delved further into Pardo's background and actions leading up to the attack, they uncovered chilling evidence of meticulous planning. Pardo's rented car, parked a short distance from the crime scene, held a shocking cache of weapons and supplies, suggesting he had prepared extensively for the night's horrific events. Investigators discovered the car was rigged with explosives, set to detonate if anyone attempted to tamper with it. The vehicle also contained thousands of dollars in cash, hidden beneath his clothing with plastic wrap and secured by a specialized girdle. His plan, it appeared, had been to escape after carrying out the massacre. But after setting the house ablaze, he had suffered severe burns, which thwarted his escape and ultimately led him to take his own life. When detectives searched Pardo's home, they found evidence that revealed even more sinister preparations. His residence was a virtual bomb factory filled with remnants of explosive devices and materials that he had been stockpiling. Empty handgun boxes, rounds of ammunition, and containers of highly flammable fuel were scattered throughout his home, indicating a level of premeditation that shocked even the most experienced investigators. Pardo's acquisition of multiple firearms and his assembly of a homemade flamethrower illustrated a methodical approach to violence, showing a man who was not only prepared to take lives but to inflict maximum destruction. In the community, people were stunned by the revelations. Pardo had long been perceived as a friendly, even charming man. Many neighbors described him as personable and thoughtful, known to smile and make small talk whenever they crossed paths. He had even been seen volunteering at a local church, ushering during services, and stopping by neighbors' homes to ask how they were doing. These outward gestures had masked a dark side that few, if any, had seen coming. Friends and acquaintances who had known Pardo before the divorce described him as seemingly stable and content. Yet, in the aftermath of the separation, a hidden side emerged, fueled by resentment and an obsessive need for control. His charm had concealed deeper issues: extreme narcissism, obsessive-compulsive tendencies, and a refusal to accept his failed marriage. The image of the affable, generous man that Pardo had maintained unraveled in the wake of his violent actions, leaving a community grappling with the shocking transformation of someone they had thought they knew. The investigation into Pardo's character and actions ultimately painted a portrait of a man who had been silently descending into a state of mental instability, allowing his anger and narcissism to drive him to the unthinkable. In the weeks that followed, this chilling revelation left the community of Covina struggling to reconcile the man they knew with the monstrous act he had committed, a reminder of how easily appearances can mask deeper, dangerous impulses. The motive behind Bruce Jeffrey Pardo's brutal actions lay in the turbulent breakdown of his marriage to Sylvia Ortega Pardo. What had started as a seemingly happy union had devolved into bitterness and resentment, a descent that ultimately drove Pardo to an act of unimaginable violence. Initially, Pardo had been drawn to Sylvia's warm and welcoming family, who embraced him and brought him into their close-knit circle. However, as time passed, Pardo's controlling and distant nature strained their relationship. Money became a frequent point of contention, with arguments centering around Pardo's unwillingness to support Sylvia's children from previous marriages. The warmth he had once shown her family faded, and by early 2008, the tension in their relationship had reached a breaking point. In March 2008, Sylvia made the decision to separate from Pardo, later filing for divorce. Pardo's reaction was harsh and unforgiving. Rather than working toward a respectful separation, he packed her belongings, leaving them on the driveway as a final dismissal of their life together. The divorce became final just days before Christmas, and by then, Pardo's anger and frustration had reached a dangerous peak. Rather than moving on, he allowed his anger to fester, and his resentment towards Sylvia and her family grew into a consuming desire for revenge. Months before the attack, Pardo began preparing meticulously for his plan. He started by purchasing firearms one by one, visiting local gun shops and buying each weapon in cash. Over the months, he acquired a small arsenal, including multiple handguns and an unusual flamethrower device that he would later use to set the Ortega home ablaze. The gun purchases were calculated, spaced out to avoid drawing attention. He also bought hundreds of rounds of ammunition, creating an ample supply for the deadly plan he was constructing. In a final disturbing touch, he ordered a custom-made Santa suit, ostensibly for a holiday party. However, this suit would become part of his disguise, allowing him to approach the Ortega home without arousing suspicion. This chilling choice added a layer of deception and irony to his plan, as he would arrive dressed as a figure of joy and innocence, only to unleash horror on the unsuspecting family. Pardo's preparations didn't end there. He also arranged a plan for escape, imagining that he could flee the scene and evade capture. He rented a car and packed it with essentials for a getaway: maps, food, water, clothing, and even a can of gasoline. Aware that his actions would attract a manhunt, he also wrapped $17,000 in cash around his legs, securing it with plastic wrap and a girdle. Pardo even went so far as to purchase a plane ticket to Illinois, hoping he could flee across the country and start a new life, leaving the wreckage of his actions behind. However, Pardo's plan quickly unraveled. In his final act of destruction, when he ignited the flamethrower and set the Ortega home on fire, he was severely injured. The flames backfired, burning him badly across his arms, hands, and face, causing excruciating pain and leaving him unable to carry out his escape. In desperation, he abandoned his plan to flee and instead drove to his brother's house, where he ultimately took his own life. His injuries and the utter failure of his plan underscored the dark irony of his intentions. In trying to destroy others, he had brought destruction upon himself. The methodical nature of Pardo's planning painted a disturbing portrait of a man consumed by anger and incapable of handling his loss in a rational way. His meticulous preparation, paired with his ultimate failure, revealed the depth of his hatred and the extent to which he was willing to go to exact revenge. In the end, Pardo's plan, built on resentment and rage, turned back on him, leaving him alone and broken. A fitting, though tragic, end to a night of horror that devastated the Ortega family and left a scar on the Covina community. The attack left the community of Covina in shock and profound mourning. The Ortega family was a respected, well-loved part of the neighborhood, known for their kindness, warmth, and strong family bonds. News of the massacre spread quickly, and residents were left grappling with the horror that had struck so close to home. Christmas lights that had decorated the neighborhood became haunting reminders of the night's violence, and the once peaceful, festive streets now felt heavy with grief. The entire town came together in an outpouring of support, holding vigils, setting up memorials, and finding ways to show solidarity with the Ortega family, even as they struggled to comprehend the brutality of the attack. For Leticia Yusefsky, the tragedy would forever alter her life. She had not only survived the horror, but had also saved her injured daughter and other family members, helping them escape through the fire and smoke. Yet her pain ran deep. The loss of her parents, siblings, and extended family was unimaginable, and the trauma of that night would be a permanent part of her memory. Despite the overwhelming grief, Leticia made a powerful choice. She would not let the darkness of that night define her or her family's legacy. Rather than allowing hatred and bitterness to consume her, she chose to honor the memories of her loved ones by focusing on resilience, love, and gratitude. In the years that followed, Leticia became a source of inspiration, speaking out about the power of resilience and forgiveness. She encouraged others to reject anger and revenge, instead promoting the importance of love and compassion in the face of tragedy. Her message was clear. Even in the wake of unimaginable loss, it was possible to find healing by focusing on the love that remained. Through her strength, she kept the spirit of her family alive, cherishing the good memories and refusing to let the actions of one individual overshadow the joy and kindness that had defined her family. The Covina community, too, drew strength from Leticia's example. The memories of the Ortega family were kept alive through annual gatherings, memorials, and acts of kindness that reminded everyone of the family's generosity and warmth. The detectives who had worked on the case maintained their connection with the surviving family members, particularly around the holidays, offering support and honoring their memory. Even as the years passed, the legacy of the Ortega family endured, a testament to their spirit and the resilience of those who survived. Leticia's choice to rise above hatred and her commitment to keeping her family's memory alive turned a tragedy into a story of courage, compassion, and healing, serving as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit in even the darkest times. As we close the story of the Covina Family Massacre, we're reminded of how, in an instant, joy can be shattered by tragedy. What began as a night of love, laughter, and holiday cheer ended in unimaginable loss. The events of that night left a lasting impact on the Ortega family, the Covina community, and all who have since heard their story. It's a stark reminder of how fragile life can be and how, even in the most cherished moments, we're never fully shielded from the potential for darkness. But from this tragedy, we also see a powerful example of resilience. Leticia's choice to honor her family's memory with love, rather than hate, speaks volumes about the strength of the human spirit. Her dedication to healing and sharing kindness serves as a reminder to all of us that, even in our most painful moments, we can choose to carry forward the light of those we have lost. Thank you for joining me in honoring the Ortega family's memory. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. How do you think such tragedies shape communities and families? Please feel free to share in the comments below. And if you found this video meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more true crime stories. It helps me continue bringing these important stories to light. Until next time, stay safe and remember to hold your loved ones close.